I'm Bill McBride, the Executive Director of the National Governors Association, and I want to welcome you all to the 5th National Summit on State Cybersecurity here in Columbus, Ohio. We are honored to be joined by Governor Mike DeWine of Ohio, who will be offering welcome remarks of his own momentarily, as well as our National Governor Association Chairman, Governor Asa Hutchinson of Arkansas, who will be joining me shortly on stage for discussion of cybersecurity policies, implications for our economic and national security. So under their leadership, Ohio and Arkansas have been models in state cybersecurity, and their example is particularly relevant at this time of increased cyber threats and in the wake of the bipartisan infrastructure legislation passed late last year, which includes $1 billion in funding for state and local in cybersecurity improvements for the next 4 years. And so to our state officials in particular, I hope you find that NGA's programming provides useful insights and inspires your vision for securing cyber ecosystems of tomorrow. We have a diverse range of attendees on hand, including governors' policy advisors, Homeland Security advisors, chief information officers, chief information security officers, and National Guard leaders with representation from 50 states and territories. And finally, I want to thank a few folks without whom we wouldn't have been here, including our friends at NASCIO, which is the National Association of State Chief Information Officers. For more than 7 years now, they have funded its members to participate with NGA in cyber meetings, and I also want to thank NGA's corporate partners who are here with us today for their tireless support that has helped make this summit possible. As you know, the only national conference exclusively based on state cybersecurity. And a very special thanks to the American Electric Power, headquartered right here in Columbus, for hosting our reception this evening over at the Ohio State House, just a few blocks away, and to which you are all invited to attend this evening. So at this time, please welcome a true Ohio institution, Governor Mike DeWine.
Thank you very much. Welcome to Ohio, everyone. It's not always quite this hot, but we're delighted to have you all here. And this is a topic that I think none of us would like to be dealing with, but it's something that we have to deal with. And I want to thank the NGA for putting this on, and I want to thank my friend Asa Hutchinson, who you're going to hear from in just a moment. The governor and I were talking earlier today. He and his daughter Sarah came over to the Capitol, and we talked a little bit about cybersecurity, but we also talked about a little history, just a little preview of the Capitol. This was restored about 25 years ago, and when I was in the state Senate, it was cut up and cubicles and what happens to a building over the years. But great renovation was done, and it's a Capitol that dates back, built prior to shortly before the Civil War, and a lot of history. One of the things I was relating to Governor Hutchinson, Abraham Lincoln was there several times, but he came through. If you remember in those days when Lincoln was elected, the president became president in March and not January as of today. And I don't know the exact date, can't remember the exact date, but he was working his way basically to Washington by train, stopping in different state capitals. So he stopped in this state capital here in Columbus, and he happened to be talking to the governor at the time, the governor's office. At the time, he got the word that the Congress had counted the votes in the Electoral College, and he was going to be president. So we call the desk where he was seated now the Lincoln desk. And it was actually rediscovered 25 years ago when they did the remodeling. But I think you'll find it to be, at least we think it's a very, very beautiful Capitol. Looks like you've got a great session, a lot of great speakers. One of the things that I always find is useful in meetings like this is not just the speakers, but the interaction between different folks who are here. Bill tells me you've got people from 50 states, which I find is a phenomenal, just an amazing thing, and I think it shows the interest in this very, very important subject. I might just mention, before I turn it over to Governor Hutchinson, a couple things that we have done. One of the things that we did is we put one person in state government in charge. And you'll be hearing from him, Kirk Harris, shortly. But I always believe that the buck's got to stop somewhere, and you need to have someone in charge, and you can't really spread things out. And so, he has been involved. In April, I signed an executive order creating the new position within our administration. Cybersecurity Strategic Advisor is what the name we came up with. He's tasked with coordinated efforts to protect the state's data infrastructure, develop a overall response plan, create uniform reporting standards, support state agencies, local governments, and academic institutions throughout Ohio. So we've really broadened what he does, not just in state government, but we are a state of local government, all kinds of different entities from the villages to the cities to the townships, to the school districts, and many of them really do not have all the resources that they need to deal with cybersecurity. So part of his portfolio is trying to come up with the help and assistance that they need in that particular area. Second, I'd mention some of the work that we have done. Some of the work I've done as a member of the co-chair of the Council of Governors. Council of Governors came up, the subcommittee where I was co-chair, really came up with kind of a playbook of what should be the relationship between the federal government and the states in regard to a massive cyber security breach. And we think that playbook that came up that we've created along with our federal partners will be helpful. Could be very, very helpful. And finally, I might mention a bill that we were able to get drafted, get passed when I was Attorney General before I became governor. And it's really tried to give an incentive to businesses in the state to do the basic work that they need to do on cybersecurity. And so we set out the minimum standards and said if they, in fact, did that, then we would give them a shield or protection against suits being filed. If they did what they're supposed to do, still you had a breach, still you had a problem, we would give them that security. And it's kind of the use of not the stick but the carrot to try to get people to really do what is in their own best interest and to protect themselves. So that we think can be served as a model. I know some other states have been looking at that as well. So again, enjoy Columbus, enjoy Ohio. We're delighted that you're here, and I'm going to ask Governor Hutchinson to come up.
We're happy to have Governor Hutchinson join us on the stage today to continue building on these themes and discuss the critical importance of computer science education to cyber workforce development and our economic and national security. So as we start, let me provide some context here. So Governor Hutchinson is our current chair of the National Governors Association. And each year, as we have a new chair, they pick an initiative to work on. And Governor Hutchinson, during the past year, has chosen to focus on K-12 computer science education. And it's been very successful. We've had a number of events around the country showcasing this and bringing just more attention to it. And I think it's been very well received. You may know the governor's had deep experience working on homeland security and national security issues. Earlier in his career, he was worked in law enforcement and had a top position in the U.S. Department of Homeland Security when it was created under President George W. Bush. And in those roles, he's had some experience in dealing with cybersecurity issues. And then, of course, now as governor, he's dealing with state cybersecurity capabilities. But anyway, Governor Hutchinson, to start us off, can you provide us some thoughts on the nexus between computer science and cybersecurity and national security?
Well, thank you, Bill, and I want to thank Governor DeWine for hosting us today. Y'all are going to really enjoy the state capitol and the history that's there. And I want to thank the NGA. What a great organization, actually one of the few bipartisan functioning organizations left in America. And the NGA really gets things done. We work together, and this is an illustration of it. And Bill, you remember I was there in Louisiana on the first cybersecurity conference that we had that Governor John Bell Edwards hosted. And so it's nice to be back in person here in Ohio. I want to thank everybody for your work in this critical national security area. you asked me about the connection with national security, and I'll tell a little bit of a story. Whenever I was at Homeland Security, I was charged with the responsibility of negotiating with the European Commission an agreement that they would exchange and give us data on the passengers flying to the United States. Well, of course, they have some tough regulations in terms of privacy, and they were resisting this requirement to share data with us. And of course, I went there and I was meeting with them, and they said, "Tell us what your retention policy is." And I had the FBI there, and I said, "Tell me what the retention policy is on this data." And they said, "We don't have a retention policy. We keep it forever." And that was the view. And so I said, "You got to tell me something. Give me 50 years, give me something." And the point of the story, of course, is that the United States of America, we do a great job of collecting data. We love collecting data. But the citizens have to have confidence that we're going to protect that data that they give to us or that we collect. And it's a different world than the private sector, because the private sector, a consumer gives the private sector data just left and right. Who cares? You want my credit card information, you want my date of birth, here it is. Because they trust that they know what they're going to get in return. But in terms of government, America still doesn't trust government as much. And so there's an expectation that that data is going to be protected if we have to give it or the government collects it. And that is really important for us from a confidence standpoint. If we want America to have confidence in what we're doing on the government side, then we have to be successful in protecting personal information and data. And every breach that we have in which we notify them, it erodes that confidence, and that is fundamental to our national security. And so absolutely, when I was at Homeland Security, we were looking at terrorist threat, we were collecting data, but we also were mindful that there's a cyber threat, and so we created a Chief Privacy Officer, which is a good model, that they're to balance what we're doing in collecting data with protecting citizens and the privacy concerns. We have that in Arkansas in our Department of Information Services, a Chief Privacy Officer, to make sure that we're doing what we should do. Bill, I'll stop and let you ask a question. I do want to talk a little bit more about the initiative and how that might relate.
Yeah, well, let's get into that, because I think there's a natural connection there about computer science education and eventually finding qualified cybersecurity personnel, which just tell us, is that a challenge in Arkansas to find people?
Well, it is, and we've had some success in Arkansas, a significant amount of success for a small rural state, where we went from 1,100 students taking computer science when I got elected to now over 12,500 students taking it. We went from fewer than 50 teachers that were certified to teach computer science to now over 650 that have been certified to teach computer science. And so we lead the nation in terms of the number of high schools, the percent of high schools that offer it, and we have really invested in it. When I became chairman of the National Governors Association, I wanted to bring that message nationally because I do believe it is a national security issue. And we're either going to produce the talent in America for software development, for IT, for cybersecurity, or we're going to export it. We're going to be having our companies go overseas to utilize talent overseas, or we're going to be bringing in people from overseas to do it. And the best solution is, of course, for us to utilize our talent here in America to train them properly. Computer science is a foundation, but that obviously leads to cybersecurity as one element of it. And so that's a very important part of our objective. At the national level, when we made this my initiative, and as Bill said, we've had meetings in Boston and Bentonville and Denver, and we're going to have one in Maine, where we really are focusing on governors and what they're doing and best practices. But we set some specific goals, and when I became governor, there were 10% of high schools in America that offered computer science. Only 10%, 90% different, did not. And that now has grown to 51%. So over 7 years, we've made progress. But that still means 49% do not even offer it across the high schools in America. And so our goal, measurable objective, is to increase that number of high schools and that percentage rate. The second objective is to increase the number of schools, or states, increase the number of states that require computer science as a graduation credit from high school. Right now, only 3 states require that. We just joined it, so we're the 3rd state. But that's important, and of course, you got to lay the foundation because you have to have the teachers, you got to have the capability to offer it in our high schools if you're going to require it as a graduation credit. We want to increase that number. And finally, it always takes money, as you know. It takes money, and so we're trying to simply increase the number of states that actually appropriate money for computer science education. In Arkansas, we do about $5.5 million every 2 years, and that's to incentivize teachers, it's to pay stipends, it's to reward students, it's to pay the staff in our professional development. You've got to put dollars in that computer science element. So those are some of the things we're trying to accomplish nationally, and I know the states, y'all are doing a great job out there. We just want to continue to focus on that.
Yeah, I'd encourage you to go home and talk to your governor about it and your legislators and bring this up. And
A little bit of an action item there.
yes, a little bit of an action item. So that's great. So, well, you mentioned earlier, your career. You've worked on homeland and national security issues, throughout your career. And how have you seen the fields of cybersecurity and national security increasingly blur together? And are they different, or?
Well, that's a great question, and I think everybody in this room would either say they're equal, they're the same. I would just simply say they're 2 sides of the same coin. And what we've seen since my days at Homeland Security is the increasing use of cyber attacks as a state weapon. And whenever you look at Russia invading Ukraine, we were briefed, you were briefed on the threat to our own systems here because of Russia increasing the cyber attacks on our state and our private sectors and our local governments. And so it is national security from that standpoint. It obviously, when you see the Colonial Pipeline and the experience that we had there where gas prices shot up, speaking of gas prices, can you imagine us having a Colonial Pipeline incident now with prices already going up? That is certainly a national security issue, and it impacted us at that time dramatically. Speaking of that, one of the things the FBI did, it was paid in Bitcoin, the ransom. They were able to recover some of that. I would like to see more of the Bitcoin suspicious transactions, a little bit more reporting capability so that we can detect those kind of transactions that might lead us to the criminal organizations or the state actors that are supporting those cyber attacks. And so it's a tool today that's used. It will be increasing as a tool, and it absolutely is a national security issue, both in terms of our training of our young people to have the skills needed, but also just simply in terms of the threat to our states, but to our private partners as well.
I was thinking that given that nearly everything is networked in today's world, right? And so cybersecurity is no longer just the domain of the IT guy. It's much bigger than that, or the IT team. So how have you evolved in your thinking about this and about the role that governors should play in cybersecurity policy?
Well, every governor better be paying attention to it. And it's a little bit like the pandemic. I didn't get elected to deal with the pandemic, and I didn't get elected governor, I thought, to simply to focus on cybersecurity. But you better be able to address that issue in your state. I applaud Governor DeWine. I thought that was a creative idea that he did when he was Attorney General. And, clearly, he's leading from the top in terms of cybersecurity. I have to lead in the same way. And so, we've set up a executive order with my signature for Cybersecurity Advisory Council, bringing together the best minds on this, making recommendations, but also reviewing our processes here in the state. We have a single agency that is the lead, which is our Department of Information Services. I brought somebody in from the private sector who's doing a very good job. Whenever I had information from the feds about the threat from Russia after the invasion of Ukraine, I call up my director of Information Services and I say, what are we doing? Just review with me exactly what's happening and what steps that we're taking. And then I raise the issue of local governments because that's really been the focal point of many attacks, ransomware particularly, in higher education institutions, and they're not designed to handle it. They just haven't got the infrastructure to, and so I wanted our state, to be a better resource for them, to coordinate more fully with them and have information and transparency in when those attacks and to coordinate that effort. And so a governor has to lead. You have to be able to have the person in place that does the policy. You have to have the capability to manage an emergency, an attack, and have that set up. And then for the policy side, you've got to be able to make sure that you do the auditing. If the tragedy down in Uvalde taught us that you can train, but you've got to be able to audit and make sure that training is put into place. And certainly that is true in the area of cybersecurity as well. And so you got to test the systems as you put the right policies in place.
You may be, and you probably are, the exception to the rule of you were a governor who was elected with background in this area. We're going to have many new governors coming into office this year, 36 gubernatorial elections across the country. Many of them are term limited. There will be new governors. And so I guess I would encourage this group to watch, and when your new governor comes into office, highlight this as an area that they should focus on. It's actually something that we're doing at the NGA. We have what's called a seminar for new governors, or it's referred to as New Governors School. But this is something we've really upped our game on for this new class coming in, that there will be some really dedicated sessions to this topic. And I think it's just really important for all of you to work with your new governors when they come in to highlight that. And I don't know if you want to expand on that at all.
Just a couple of points. First, you're absolutely right. Governors coming in come from a whole host of backgrounds. They're going to get hit with everything, and they need to understand the basics of what happens in a cyber attack and how the state responds to it. So it has to be a part of their training. Secondly, and I'm going to ask this question if I might. I don't know how to do this with the states, but if your state has cybersecurity insurance, can you raise your hand? All right. A lot. So how many states here do not have, to your knowledge, cybersecurity insurance? So it just about every state, it looks like, there's some that have not, but the majority, by far the majority, has cybersecurity insurance. That didn't happen in my state until my second year. So it was about 6 years ago that we acquired cyber insurance, and it was like pulling teeth for me to agree to it. But man, has it paid off over and over and over again in our state. And of course, the rates go up. It's expensive, but absolutely essential because they help us manage that cyber attack, as you well know. And so the new governors need to be trained on that. The other point is that right now we have the infrastructure money coming in. We still have the ARPA money coming in. They specifically allowed us to use some of these funds for cybersecurity. And I'm glad that was specifically a part of the rulemaking. So the federal money can be used for that purpose. So this is a unique opportunity in history to spend money on that which governments don't like to spend money on because it's hidden and the public don't see it. Unless there's something bad happens, and then you can appreciate it more. But the new governors need to understand the flow of that money and how that can be used for cybersecurity and be briefed on what's happening in their particular state. In Arkansas, we use some of our CARES Act money, actually $35 million, to help us to complete our data center modernization, which is sort of foundational to bring all of our state systems into one data center, which was really resisted by a lot of the departments. But we brought it all together. We've got CARES Act money that we're modernizing that, but also doing the training, moving to zero trust architecture, a number of different things. We also got $4.5 million to help us with local governments, to build that bridge with them and help them with their response. So yes, new governors need to be aware of the money that's available and the challenge that they face with it.
And speak to us a little bit about this partnership between the state and the federal government and where you see it standing, based on your background as both being in the federal government, being in state government. I guess since you left the federal government, it's really, geared up a lot. But what are some areas that states can work with the federal government on, and where can they be doing a better job on both sides, both the federal and the states?
Well, from the state perspective, many times the federal government is so large, so bureaucratic, so entangled, and so many different departments that it's almost intimidating as to where you make the entry points. Exactly who do you relate to? You've got the FBI that has a lead role in the investigations of cyber attacks. You've got Department of Homeland Security that is the lead agency in partnering with the private sector and state and local partners. So you've got two, and then of course you've got the White House, the Domestic Policy Council that has a role to play as well. And so you've got to understand those different roles that they have. Homeland Security, coordinate and sharing information, that's where you go to for the resources. And then FBI, whenever you get an attack and whenever there's a criminal investigation going on. Let me talk about the private sector for a moment because, we're concerned about the state threat, but if your transportation system, if your subway system, which is private sector owned in many cases, or your water systems are attacked from cybersecurity. Seemed like that went off for no. What's the role of the private sector? So whenever I was at Homeland Security, we just started it, and we set up a very important principle. You have two choices when it comes to the federal government, and that is if you have an asset that's national security interest, then you want to highly regulate that from the federal government, whether it's a chemical plant or whether it is a electric grid that you're worried about being compromised. Does the federal government set every standard of compliance? And the answer is we chose not to do that. We said we don't want to overregulate, we want to have a partnership. And so we simply say, Homeland Security, these critical infrastructure have to have a plan. You have to file that plan with us, and then you have to show the capability of building that plan and auditing to make sure we have success. And so that works. But that's still the same today. And so we don't want a federal government that's going to tell every private sector partner what to do. And we have to just simply say, you've got to have a plan, you've got to invest in that plan, you've got to give us confidence there. That's the partnership that's been developed, and we want to be able to maintain that. And so the essential part of it is the ISACs, where they join together in the same room to share information. It is confidence in them investing in it. I love the incentives that if they invest, they're going to get some reward for investing in that protection.
You can tell that he really enjoys this, right? He knows all the acronyms, right? It's great. He's got the background. It's like talking to one of your own. I think we've got time for a couple questions. If anyone has a question, if you want to just stand up and identify yourself and ask your question. Anybody out there? Sure.
There's that dichotomy that exists between the executive branch and the legislative branch, especially when it comes to budgeting around cybersecurity. These federal grants are going to come down, but how do you get the legislature to come along and say, we need continued budgeting aside plus expenditures?
A great question. And you've got to realize in government you have to have a lot of partners to get anything accomplished, and the legislature is a critical partner. Usually you'll have one or two in the legislature, perhaps more, that can be champions. They understand the issue, they understand the importance in it. You've got to bring them on board. And I think you've got to look at whether there ought to be a special committee. That way there's a focused attention within the General Assembly, what we call it in Arkansas, for cyber initiatives, and then make them just as much a partner, quite frankly, as the governor. And you've got to bring them along because they ultimately control those purse strings. I've found that they're very supportive of it. Our data center modernization was a huge chunk of money. I had to have legislative approval for that, and they did. They asked a lot of questions, so you had to bring them along for it. The cyber insurance side, the investment in training, that's more within the executive branch. But our challenge looking into the future is that we have our Department of Information Services is on a cost recovery model. And some of you all might have the same. But that means you got to bill your customers in state government for every investment that you make. Well, a lot of the investments in cybersecurity are hard to bill for. It's just adding the cost to them. And so we're having to look at changing the model from a cost recovery to only partial cost recovery and putting some general revenue funds into the efforts to strengthen our systems, our IT infrastructure, and our cybersecurity. So there's no way around it. They're a partner, and you got to bring them along.
Great.
Great question. Thank you.
Any other, seeing out in the lights here? Here we have a question over on the left here.
Thank you, Governor. Chip Stewart, Chief Information Security Officer for the state of Maryland. I think you mentioned ISACs. One of the big challenges that we've seen with regard to information sharing is there's an unwillingness for private organizations to share and vice versa. I think there's a lot of fear around the potential repercussions. Do you see a role in government, either legislatively or some other mechanism, to help facilitate that and kind of remove that friction?
The point is absolutely well taken. You look at Arkansas and Walmart, the international home of Walmart, the largest global retailer, the largest employer in about 25 states. They're located in Arkansas, and cybersecurity is very, very important to them. They invest in it, and they're bigger than the state of Arkansas. They're a bigger partner, and for us to go to them and say, yeah, share information with us, that's a big deal for Walmart, and I'm sure other states have the same relationship and challenge. What we found is that we actually have a nonprofit, a Forge Institute, that's a private sector partner that has got some grants to develop that relationship and to put the private sector in there as a full member as well as the state. And so we're utilizing that mechanism that's not strictly within state government, but that it is more private sector driven as a tool to enhance those partnerships. It's still in its infancy stage, but I think that's an opportunity and something that can be looked at. because the other one, you know, is the fusion centers that we have where everybody sits together, but it's hard to get the private sector to commit that kind of resources when they've already got their world within themselves. Whenever the attack happens, of course, you don't always even get the information about an attack from the private sector because they can handle it internally. So you don't have that level of awareness, and I think you've got to strengthen that. I don't know that you can mandate it, but you build a strong enough relationship, they'll share that with you. Does anybody, let me ask this question, does anybody have a better answer? That's really a good question. Can somebody educate me on a better answer or a better solution? All right, you'll have to live with what I gave you.
All right, all right.
Whenever I leave, the truth will really come out.
That's right.
Thank you for that.
I think we have time for one more. Any other questions out there? The bright lights. There, we got one right here.
So Lieutenant Colonel Leslie King from Arizona Army National Guard, Cyber Task Force. Just curious, our state is working hard at integrating the National Guard Cyber Task Force into supporting Department of Homeland and doing vulnerability assessments on different state agencies. I'm curious how Arkansas is integrating their National Guard assets into the cyber defense for the state, sir.
It is an asset that is underutilized. We have, National Guard has great cyber capabilities. We've actually utilized them in the education arena in Jacksonville, which is home of the Little Rock Air Force Base. The military personnel have children that go to school there or young adults, and so they have on their own enhanced the cybersecurity training so that they will be exposed to it. They'll build talent that goes into that military service. They're also big partners with our Forge Institute that I mentioned that builds those relationships with the private sector. We haven't utilized them in the auditing function, which I find very interesting that you point out, in state government, which is very, very critical. So that might be a good practice model that can be shared with other states and something that we should look at. They are critical to their mission. We need to be able to utilize their capabilities to a greater extent at the state level. And particularly, the local governments and higher education has really been hit in Arkansas, and I think they could be probably helpful there. Okay. Listen, thank you. This has been terrific, Bill. Thanks for giving me the time to have this conversation today with you. And I know you're going to have some ongoing discussions that will prove beneficial, and I look forward to hopefully getting a report back from it. So thank you for your work in securing our country, securing our data, and by that, securing our freedom. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor.